The salt spray stung my face as I hauled myself up the cargo net, for what felt like the 1000th time that morning. Below me, the Pacific Ocean churned dark and unforgiving, promising a bone-crushing impact if my grip failed. Above me, the silhouettes of my fellow candidates moved like shadows against the gray dawn sky, each one fighting their own battle against exhaustion, doubt, and the relentless voice of Instructor Chief Ramirez. "Move it, Torres. My grandmother climbs faster than that, and she's been dead for 10 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I gritted my teeth and pushed harder, my shoulders screaming in protest. Around me, the other candidates, all men, seemed to flow up the rope like they were born to it. I'd made it through 16 weeks of the most brutal training the U.S. Navy had to offer, but as I watched another candidate ring the bell and quit, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The bell, that goddamn bell that had been calling my name for weeks now. My name is Elena Torres, and I was 24 hours away from becoming the first woman to graduate from Navy SEAL training. Or so I thought. The trouble started during the final navigation exercise. We'd been dropped in pairs somewhere in the mountains of Southern California with nothing but a compass, map, and the coordinates of our extraction point 40 miles away. My partner was Jake Morrison, a farm kid from Iowa with arms like tree trunks and an easy smile that had gotten us both through more than one impossible situation. "You sure about this bearing?" Jake asked, squinting at the compass as we crouched behind a boulder. The sun was setting fast, painting the desert landscape in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if we weren't already 12 hours behind schedule. I checked the map again, my finger tracing the contour lines. Positive. "We need to head northwest through that ravine. It'll add distance but keep us out of sight of the road." What I didn't know was that my compass was off by 15 degrees, a malfunction that I'd later learn wasn't accidental. Someone had wanted me to fail, and they'd made sure I would. We spent the night walking in circles, our water running low as we navigated by stars that seemed to mock our confusion. By dawn, we were miles off course with no hope of making the extraction point in time. When the helicopter finally found us, 8 hours after our deadline, I knew my SEAL career was over before it had really begun. Technical failure, they called it. Navigation error resulting in mission compromise. The words might as well have been carved on my tombstone. In the real world, my mistake would have gotten my team killed. In training, it just got me a one-way ticket back to the fleet. I stood at attention in the commander's office as Captain Bradley delivered the news. Behind him, through the window, I could see the other candidates preparing for their final exercise. They'd make it. They'd earn their tridents. They'd become SEALs. I wouldn't. "You've got heart, Torres," Captain Bradley said, his voice not unkind. "But heart doesn't make up for operational failure. The teams need people they can count on. Absolute reliability. No exceptions." I wanted to argue, to explain about the compass, to beg for another chance. Instead, I said, "I understand, sir. Your next assignment will be with Naval Intelligence, shore duty. You'll be working protection details for high-value targets. It's important work." Important work. The kind of consolation prize they give to people who couldn't cut it where it really mattered. That was 3 years ago. Now, as I adjusted my earpiece and scanned the crowd at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, I tried to convince myself that Captain Bradley had been right. This was important work. Protecting Admiral Catherine Hayes, the Navy's highest-ranking intelligence officer, was a vital mission. The fact that it involved standing around in a pantsuit instead of kicking down doors in hostile territory was just a different, not lesser, different. "Echo 1, this is Control," came the voice of Agent Sarah Kim. My partner and the closest thing I had to a friend in the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Admiral Hayes is moving to the lecture hall. All stations check in. I pressed my finger to my earpiece. Echo 2, position secure. West entrance clear. The routine was familiar by now. Admiral Hayes gave a lot of speeches, attended a lot of conferences, and met with a lot of important people who all needed protection from threats both foreign and domestic. It was methodical work that required patience, attention to detail, and the ability to blend into the background while staying ready for anything. Everything I'd trained for as a SEAL. Just without the part where I got to shoot bad guys, Admiral Hayes emerged from the green room, looking every inch the distinguished officer she was, silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun. Her uniform crisp, despite the humid September heat. At 58, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned her stars through brilliance and determination, not politics. She was one of the few people in the Navy who'd actually supported the idea of women in combat roles, which made my current job protecting her feel like some kind of cosmic joke. "Good morning, Agent Torres," she said as I fell into step beside her. "How's the crowd looking?" "Mixed group, Admiral. Mostly military and defense contractors, but we've got some foreign attaches and a few journalists. Agent Kim is running background checks on the late arrivals." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Any red flags?" "Before we jump back in, tell US where you're tuning in from, and if the story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nothing specific, ma'am, but ... I hesitated, then decided to trust my instincts. Something feels off. Too many people with clearances that barely justify their presence. Too many last-minute additions to the guest list. Admiral Hayes slowed her pace slightly, giving me her full attention. This was one of the things I respected about her. She listened when her people had concerns, even when those concerns were based on nothing more than gut feelings. "Your recommendation? Stick to the planned route and timeline, but stay flexible. I've got Agent Kim positioned with overwatch of the main entrance, and I'll maintain close protection throughout the presentation." "Understood. Let's get this over with." The lecture hall was packed with maybe 300 people, all there too. Hear Admiral Hayes speak about maritime security in the 21st century. I took my position at the side of the stage, scanning faces in the crowd while she began her presentation. Everything looked normal, too normal, maybe. The kind of normal that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. 15 minutes into the speech, I spotted him. Third row, aisle seat. Mid-40s, dark hair, wearing a navy blazer that was just a little too tight across the shoulders. He'd been in the bathroom when I'd done my initial scan, which meant Agent Kim hadn't gotten a clear photo for identification. Now he sat perfectly still, his attention focused not on Admiral Hayes, but on the exits. His right hand rested casually in his jacket pocket. I touched my earpiece. "Control, this is Echo 2. I've got a possible problem. Third row, aisle seat, suspect in navy blazer. Can you run facial recognition?" "Copy that, Echo 2. Stand by." The man's head turned slightly, and for just a moment, our eyes met. Something passed between us, recognition, maybe, or just the mutual awareness that we were both predators in a room full of prey. He smiled, just a slight upturn at the corner of his mouth, and I felt my blood turn to ice. I'd seen that smile before. In a classified briefing photo. Yuki Tanaka, former Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, dishonorably discharged for selling classified submarine patrol routes to Chinese intelligence. Current status: wanted by Interpol for arms, trafficking and suspected terrorism connections, and he was reaching into his jacket. "Gun!" I shouted, drawing my service weapon as I launched myself toward the stage. Around me, chaos erupted as 300 people suddenly realized they were in the middle of an active shooter situation. Chairs overturned, People screamed. And through it all, I could see Tanaka rising from his seat with a pistol in his hand. Time slowed the way it does in moments of absolute crisis. I could see Admiral Hayes turning toward my voice, confusion on her face giving way to understanding. I could see Agent Kim fighting through the panicking crowd, her weapon drawn but with no clear shot. I could see Tanaka's pistol swinging toward the podium where Admiral Hayes stood frozen in the chaos, 60 feet. That's how far I was from the shooter when he fired his first shot. The bullet shattered the podium inches from Admiral Hayes's head, sending splinters of wood flying as she finally dove for cover. Tanaka adjusted his aim, and I knew with absolute certainty that his second shot wouldn't miss. I had maybe 2 seconds to stop him. I raised my pistol, finding my sight picture through the chaos of bodies and overturned chairs. The fundamentals came back like muscle memory, sight alignment, breathing, trigger control. Everything I'd learned as a SEAL candidate. Everything I'd practiced for 3 years in training scenarios that never seemed to matter. Until now Tanaka's finger tightened on his trigger. I exhaled slowly and squeezed. The shot echoed through the lecture hall like thunder, cutting through the screams and confusion with absolute finality. Tanaka stumbled backward, his pistol clattering to the floor as my bullet found its marked center mass. He tried to reach for the weapon, but Agent Kim was already there, her boot kicking it away as she secured the scene. The whole thing had lasted maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds to go from routine protection detail to active shooter situation to crisis resolved. 10 seconds that would replay in my mind for the rest of my life. Admiral Hayes, I called out, scanning the room for additional threats while keeping my weapon trained on Tanaka's still form. Status report. I'm okay, came her voice from behind the podium. Elena. That was incredible. I wanted to feel proud, to feel vindicated, to feel like maybe I'd finally proven myself worthy of the trust that had been placed in me. Instead, all I felt was the familiar weight of adrenaline crash and the knowledge that somewhere in this chaos was an answer to a question I hadn't known. I needed to ask why had Yuki Tanaka, international fugitive and suspected terrorist, decided to take a shot at Admiral Catherine Hayes on a random Tuesday morning in Newport, Rhode Island? And more importantly, who had told him she'd be here? As paramedics worked on Tanaka and crime, scene technicians began processing the lecture hall. I caught Admiral Hayes looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something else too. Something that looked almost like recognition. Agent Torres, she said quietly, drawing me aside as the chaos continued around us. I need you to know that what happened here today, this wasn't random. Someone wanted me dead, and they came very close to succeeding. I nodded, still processing the implications. Do you have any idea who might? I have several ideas, she cut me off. And I'm going to need your help to figure out which one is. Right, but first, I need to know something about you. She fixed me with a stare that seemed to see right through me. 3 years ago, you were dropped from SEAL training due to a navigation failure. What I want to know is whether you believe that failure was your fault. The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent 3 years trying not to think about that night in the desert. 3 years telling myself it didn't matter. 3 years pretending I'd moved on. I started, then stopped. Around us, the investigation continued, but Admiral Hayes waited patiently for my answer. No, I said finally. I don't think it was my fault, but I could never prove it. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. Agent Torres, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The mission you failed 3 years ago? It was sabotaged. Your compass was deliberately tampered with by someone who wanted to make sure the first woman never graduated from SEAL training. The words hit me like bullets, each one finding its mark with devastating precision. 3 years of self-doubt, 3 years of wondering what I could have done differently, 3 years of carrying the weight of failure, all based on a lie. Who? I managed to ask. That's what we're going to find out, Admiral Hayes said. Because whoever sabotaged your training is connected to what happened here today. And if we don't stop them, this attack was just the beginning. As if summoned by her words, Agent Kim appeared at my elbow, her face grim. Admiral, we've got a problem. Tanaka's not talking, but we found something in his hotel room, a list of targets. High-value Navy personnel, all scheduled to die in the next 72 hours. Your name is at the top, she said to Admiral Hayes. But it's not the only one. Admiral Hayes took the list, her face growing pale as she scanned the names. My God, if they succeed with even half of these... what is it? I asked. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. It's a decapitation strike, she said quietly. Someone is trying to eliminate the entire leadership structure of naval intelligence. And if they succeed, our enemies will have access to every classified operation, every agent, every secret we've spent decades protecting. The weight of the revelation settled over me like a physical presence. This wasn't just about one failed assassination attempt. This was about the systematic destruction of everything we'd sworn to protect. What do you need me to do? I asked. Admiral Hayes folded the list and tucked it into her jacket. I need you to help me figure out who's behind this before they finish what they started. And Elena? She used my first name, something she'd never done before. I need you to do it as the SEAL you should have been, not as the agent they tried to turn you into. The words hit me with unexpected force, awakening something I'd buried 3 years ago when I'd accepted that I'd never be good enough. But standing there in that bullet-scarred lecture hall, having just saved the life of one of the Navy's most important officers, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I felt like maybe I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When do we start? I asked. Now, Admiral Hayes said. Because according to this list, the next target is scheduled to die tomorrow morning. And if our intelligence is correct, they have no idea they're in danger. As we walked toward the exit, past the crime scene tape and the still processing investigators, I touched the empty space on my chest where a SEAL Trident should have been. Maybe I'd never earned that piece of metal, but I'd earned something else today. A second chance to prove that failure didn't define me. The question was whether it would be enough to stop whatever was coming next. Outside, the September sun was beginning to set over Narragansett Bay, painting the water in shades of gold and red that reminded me of that night in the desert when everything had gone wrong. But this time, I wasn't navigating by a broken compass in the darkness. This time, I had a clear target and a mission that mattered. And this time, I wasn't going to fail. The secure conference room in the basement of the Naval War College felt like a tomb, windowless, soundproof, and filled with the kind of tension that comes when people realize their world is about to change forever. Admiral Hayes sat at the head of the polished table, the assassination target list spread before her like a battle plan drawn in blood. Agent Kim worked furiously at her laptop, cross-referencing names and locations while I paced the perimeter, my mind racing through possibilities. Commander Michael Reeves, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Admiral Hayes read from the list. Scheduled to speak at the Pentagon tomorrow at 0800, Captain Lisa Chun, Office of Naval Intelligence, meeting with CIA liaisons at Langley. At 1400, Rear Admiral Thomas Burke, Naval Security Group, attending his daughter's wedding in San Diego this weekend. Each name represented not just a life, but decades of experience and classified knowledge that our enemies would kill to possess or eliminate. The pattern was becoming clear. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to assassinate key personnel. They were systematically targeting the institutional memory of naval intelligence. There, Kim said, pointing at her screen. I found the connection. All of these officers were involved in Operation Silent Current, the classified investigation. into Chinese intelligence operations in U.S. naval facilities. I stopped pacing. What kind of investigation? Admiral Hayes leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 58 years. The kind that could start a war if it became public. We've been tracking systematic infiltration of our most sensitive installations. Submarine bases, weapons depots, communication centers. Someone has been feeding Beijing real-time intelligence on our Pacific Fleet operations for over 2 years. And you think the same people who sabotaged my SEAL training are behind this? I asked. Not think. No. She opened a classified folder I hadn't noticed before. Elena, what I'm about to show you is compartmentalized at the highest levels. Agent Kim, you're cleared for this. But nothing leaves this room. She slid a photograph across the table, a surveillance shot of a man in a Navy uniform stepping out of a black sedan. Even from a distance, I recognized him immediately. My stomach dropped like I'd just jumped out of a plane without a parachute. Master Chief Petty Officer Vincent Kowalski, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He was my instructor during SEAL training. And according to financial records we've been quietly investigating for 6 months, he's been receiving payments from a shell company with ties to Chinese intelligence, Admiral Hayes said. The same shell company that paid Yuki Tanaka for today's assassination attempt. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Kowalski had been in charge of equipment accountability during my training. He would have had access to my compass, opportunity to sabotage it, and motive if he was already compromised by foreign intelligence. My failure hadn't been about proving women couldn't hack it as SEALs. It had been about eliminating someone who might one day be in a position to investigate his activities. He knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Somehow he knew I'd end up in naval intelligence, knew I might eventually stumble across his operation. Elena, you have to understand your SEAL training failure was never about your capabilities, Admiral Hayes said gently. It was about preventing you from becoming exactly what you are now, one of our best investigators with the tactical skills to back up your analysis. Agent Kim looked up from her laptop, her face grim. Admiral, we've got movement on Kowalski. NSA intercepts show him making encrypted calls to known Chinese handlers in the last hour. And there's something else, he's not at his duty station. He went on emergency leave this morning, right after the Newport attack. Where is he? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. San Diego, Kim replied. Same city where Rear Admiral Burke is attending his daughter's wedding tomorrow. Admiral Hayes stood, her command presence filling the room. We need to move fast. Elena, I'm authorizing you for full tactical deployment. Agent Kim, coordinate with the San Diego field office. I want Kowalski under surveillance within the hour. Admiral, I said, with respect, this feels like a trap. If Kowalski knows we're onto him, why would he expose himself by going after Burke personally? She paused, considering. What are you thinking? I'm thinking this isn't about individual assassinations anymore. Burke's daughter's wedding, it's going to be attended by half the Navy's intelligence community. Kowalski isn't planning to kill one target. He's planning to kill them all. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Kim's fingers flew over her keyboard as she pulled up the wedding guest list, her face growing paler with each name that appeared. Jesus Christ, she breathed. It's everyone. Every officer involved in Operation Silent Current, plus their families. Over 200 people, including dozens of active intelligence personnel. Admiral Hayes was already reaching for her secure phone. We need to evacuate that wedding immediately. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. If we evacuate, Kowalski disappears, and we lose our only chance to roll up his entire network. Plus, how do we explain evacuating a Navy wedding without revealing the investigation? The leak would be worse than the attack. Then what do you suggest? I felt something click into place. A certainty I hadn't experienced since that night in the desert when everything went wrong. This time, though, I wasn't navigating by a broken compass. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. We let the wedding proceed, but we control the environment. I go in undercover as additional security, and we use the event to draw out not just Kowalski but his entire support network. If they're planning something big, they'll need local assets, communication equipment, escape routes. We can roll up the whole operation. Elena, Admiral Hayes said carefully, what you're describing is essentially a one-person counter-terrorism operation against an unknown number of hostile agents. That's a job for a full SEAL team, maybe, I said. But a full SEAL team would be noticed. One woman with the right credentials, blending in with the wedding security. I can get close enough to identify the threat and neutralize it before anyone else gets hurt. Agent Kim looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the plan. The risk assessment on this is off the charts. If you're wrong about Kowalski's intentions, or if there are more operatives than we think ... then people die, I finished. People who trusted us to protect them, who dedicated their lives to protecting this country. I won't let that happen. Not again. Admiral Hayes studied me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing the options, calculating risks and benefits with the cold precision that had made her one of the Navy's most effective intelligence officers. What do you need? She asked finally. 6 hours later, I was on a military transport to San Diego, my mind racing through tactical considerations and contingency plans. The wedding was scheduled for 1400 hours at the Hotel del Coronado, a historic beachfront resort. That offered both beautiful views and numerous security challenges. Multiple buildings, open grounds, water access, a nightmare scenario for protective operations, but perfect for a coordinated attack. Agent Kim had worked her magic with the local field office, establishing me as Elena Vasquez, a private security contractor hired by the Burke family for additional wedding protection. My cover story was simple. Former military, current civilian contractor, experienced in high-profile event security. Close enough to the truth to be believable, different enough to keep Kowalski from recognizing me immediately. The real challenge would be identifying his support network. Intelligence suggested he was working with at least 2 other compromised personnel, plus unknown local assets recruited for the operation. The attack could come from anywhere, a catering truck loaded with explosives, sniper positions in nearby buildings, even a boat-based assault from the ocean side. I touched down at North Island Naval Air Station at 0630, collected my equipment from the base armory, and drove to the hotel in a rented sedan that looked like any other security vehicle. The morning fog was just beginning to lift as I pulled into the service entrance, revealing the iconic red turrets of the Hotel del Coronado against the pale blue sky. Inside, the wedding preparations were already in full swing. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces while catering staff set up serving stations for the reception. I checked in with the hotel's head of security, a retired Marine named Rodriguez, who accepted my credentials without question and briefed me on their standard protocol. Big wedding, he said, scanning the guest list. Lot of Navy brass. You military? Army, I lied smoothly. Iraq and Afghanistan. You? Marines, Desert Storm. Well, at least we know what we're dealing with. These Navy types like their ceremonies fancy, but they usually behave themselves. If only he knew, I thought. I spent the morning conducting a detailed security survey, identifying potential vulnerabilities and establishing sightlines throughout the venue. The wedding ceremony would take place in the hotel's beachfront garden, with the reception following in the Crown Room ballroom. Over 300 guests were expected, including active duty personnel from Naval Intelligence, Special Operations, and Communications. At 1100 hours, I spotted my first potential threat. He was setting up audio equipment near the ceremony space mid-30s. Athletic build, short-cropped hair that screamed military, even in civilian clothes. But it was his eyes that gave him away, constantly. Scanning for threats and exits rather than focusing on his equipment. I made a mental note of his position and continued my patrol. 20 minutes later, I found the second one. She was part of the catering staff, but her knife work was too precise. Too controlled. Former military, definitely, and not the kind who'd learned to cook in a mess hall. She handled the blade like someone trained in close-quarters combat, and her position in the kitchen gave her access to both the ceremony and reception areas. By noon, I'd identified 4 possible hostiles among the legitimate staff and vendors. But no sign of Kowalski himself. The guests began arriving at 1300, a parade of Navy uniforms and formal civilian attire that represented decades of institutional knowledge and operational experience. Rear Admiral Burke looked every inch the proud father as he greeted arrivals, his wife resplendent in mother-of-the-bride elegance, their daughter radiant in her wedding dress. None of them had any idea they were walking into a trap. I positioned myself at the edge of the ceremony space, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough back to maintain surveillance on the entire area. The audio technician was making final adjustments to his equipment, while the catering woman had moved to a serving station with clear sight lines to the wedding party. "Echo Base, this is Echo 1, I whispered into my concealed microphone, using the communication protocol Agent Kim and I had established. 4 possible hostiles identified, no sign of primary target. Copy, Echo 1. Satellite surveillance shows unusual activity at the marina 2 miles south of your position. 3 boats departed at 12:30, but haven't appeared at any of the usual destinations. A boat-based assault. That would explain why I hadn't spotted Kowalski among the hotel staff. He was approaching from the water, probably with enough firepower to turn the wedding into a massacre. Echo Base, estimated time to target? Based on current speed and heading, they'll reach the hotel beach in approximately 15 minutes. That puts them right in the middle of the ceremony. I looked at my watch, 13:45. The wedding was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, which meant the boats would arrive just as Admiral Burke was walking his daughter down the aisle. Maximum emotional impact, maximum confusion, maximum casualties. Perfect timing for a terrorist attack. Echo 1 to all stations, I said, making a decision that would either save hundreds of lives or end my career. We are weapons hot. Repeat. Weapons hot. This is not a drill. I drew my concealed pistol and began moving toward the audio technician, who had suddenly become very interested in a device that definitely wasn't part of the sound system. As I approached, he looked up and our eyes met. Recognition flashed between us, hunter and prey, predator and target. He reached for something under his jacket. I put 2 rounds center mass before he could clear leather. The gunshots shattered. The pre-ceremony calm like thunder, sending guests diving for cover as I pivoted toward the catering station. The woman with the knife had already abandoned her position, melting into the crowd of panicking civilians as she moved toward the wedding. "Party, gun," someone screamed. "Active shooter." But there wasn't just one shooter. As the boats appeared offshore, visible now as black specks racing toward the beach, I could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions around the hotel grounds. This wasn't an assassination, it was a coordinated military assault designed to eliminate everyone involved in Operation Silent Current. I fought my way through the chaos toward Admiral Burke, who was trying to shield his daughter while shouting orders to his security detail. Behind me, I could hear the distinctive chatter of automatic weapons fire as Kowalski's assault team made their beach landing. "Admiral," I shouted over the gunfire. "Elena Torres, Naval Intelligence, we need to get you out of here." His eyes widened with recognition, not of me personally, but of the situation. "How many hostiles?" "Unknown, but at least 6 confirmed. They're targeting everyone involved in Silent Current. My daughter," Sir, the best way to protect her is to draw their fire away from the civilians. I need you to trust me." Admiral Burke looked at his daughter, radiant in her wedding dress, and terrified beyond measure, then back at me. In that moment, I saw him make the calculation every military leader dreads, sacrificing personal desires for operational necessity. "What do you need?" "Get to the hotel lobby and coordinate with local law enforcement. I'm going to try to reach the beach and stop their assault team before they can establish a perimeter. Torres, that's suicide. You need backup." "Sir, backup is 15 minutes away." "These people don't have 15 minutes. I could see in his eyes that he understood. This wasn't about following protocol or waiting for proper support. This was about doing whatever it took to save lives, even if it meant sacrificing your own. "Go," he said. "That's an order." I sprinted toward the beach, weaving between overturned tables and terrified guests, while gunfire erupted around the hotel grounds. Behind me, Admiral Burke was already organizing the evacuation, his command presence cutting through the panic like a beacon of calm authority. The beach assault team consisted of 3 boats, carrying 2 men, each Kowalski, and 5 other operatives equipped with military-grade weapons and body armor. They'd established a fire base near the water's edge, and were advancing on the hotel in a classic infantry formation. Professional, disciplined, deadly. I reached the seawall overlooking the beach, just as they began their final approach. 6 men, with automatic weapons against 1 woman with a pistol and whatever tactical knowledge I could remember from SEAL training. The odds were not in my favor, but sometimes the odds don't matter. Sometimes you find yourself in a position where failure means innocent people die, and that possibility becomes unacceptable regardless of the cost. I took a deep breath, checked my ammunition, and remembered something my SEAL instructor had told us during marksmanship training. It's not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about being precise when precision matters most. Master Chief Kowalski, the man who had sabotaged my compass and derailed my military career, was 40 meters away and closing fast. Time to show him what kind of soldier I'd become despite his efforts to destroy me. I rose from cover and engaged. The first shot took down the operative on Kowalski's left, a perfect headshot that dropped him instantly. The second caught the man on his right in the chest, spinning him around before he collapsed onto the sand. Kowalski and his remaining team immediately sought cover behind their beached boats, but their position was exposed, and they were taking fire from an elevated position they hadn't anticipated. In their planning, they'd assumed hotel security would be minimal and focused on the inland approaches. They hadn't planned on encountering someone with advanced tactical training and a very personal reason to see them fail. Elena Torres, Kowalski's voice carried across the beach, distorted by rage and disbelief. "I should have made sure you failed. You tried." I shouted back, moving to a new position to avoid return fire. "But I'm still here." The gunfight that followed lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. Kowalski's team had superior firepower, but I had better positioning and the advantage of fighting on familiar ground. One by one, I eliminated his operatives with the kind of precision shooting that had been drilled into me during SEAL training, until it was just Kowalski and me. He emerged from behind his boat with his hands raised. His weapon dropped onto the sand. For a moment, I thought he was surrendering. Then I saw the grenade in his left hand, pin already pulled. "You want to be a hero?" he screamed. "Let's see how heroic you feel when everyone at this wedding dies." He was going to throw the grenade toward the hotel, where hundreds of innocent people were still evacuating. Even from this distance, the blast would cause massive casualties among the fleeing civilians. I had maybe 2 seconds to stop him. Time slowed again, the way it had during the assassination attempt in Newport. I could see Kowalski's arm drawing back, could calculate the trajectory of his throw, could visualize the devastating explosion that would follow. Everything I'd trained for, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd endured for the past 3 years came down to this moment. One shot, one chance, one opportunity to prove that I was exactly the soldier I'd always known myself to be. I steadied my breathing, found my sight picture, and squeezed the trigger with the kind of precision that can only come from absolute certainty. The bullet caught Kowalski's center mass just as he began his throw. The impact spun him around, and the grenade fell harmlessly into the sand behind him, exploding with a muffled thump that sent up a shower of debris but harmed no one. He collapsed onto the beach, his grand plan reduced to failure and his network of traitors exposed and eliminated. I stood there for a moment, my weapon still trained on his motionless form, barely able to process that it was over. 3 years of carrying the weight of failure, 3 years of wondering if I was good enough, 3 years of trying to prove myself worthy of the trust others had placed in me. It was finished. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as local law enforcement and military response teams finally arrived at the scene. Behind me, the hotel evacuation was proceeding smoothly under Admiral Burke's direction, and I could see Agent Kim coordinating with FBI counterterrorism units who would handle the investigation and cleanup. Echo 1, this is Echo Base, came Kim's voice through my earpiece. Status report. Echo Base, this is Echo 1, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. All hostiles neutralized. Threat eliminated. The wedding can proceed. There was a pause. Then Admiral Hayes's voice came through the communication system. Outstanding work, Agent Torres. Return to base for debrief, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. Admiral Burke approached across the sand, his dress uniform somehow still immaculate despite the chaos of the past hour. Behind him, his daughter walked carefully in her wedding dress, her new husband at her side. Agent Torres, Admiral Burke said, stopping a few feet away. I'm not sure how to thank you. No thanks necessary, sir. I was just doing my job. No, he said firmly. You went far beyond your job. You saved not just my family, but hundreds of other families. That kind of courage. That's what we mean when we talk about honor and commitment. His daughter stepped forward, still beautiful despite the mascara streaks from tears of fear and relief. I don't know who you are, she said, but you gave me back my wedding day. You gave me back my father. Thank you. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Around us, the crime scene technicians were beginning their work, documenting the evidence of Kowalski's conspiracy and the violence it had taken to stop it. 3 hours later, I sat in another windowless conference room, this one at Naval Base San Diego, as Admiral Hayes conducted my debrief. The operation had been a complete success, Kowalski's network eliminated, the Chinese intelligence operation exposed, and hundreds of lives saved. The President wants to present you with the Navy Cross, Admiral Hayes said, closing the classified folder containing my after-action report. It's the least the country can do for someone who prevented what could have been the worst intelligence disaster in naval history. I appreciate that, Admiral, but I'm not interested in medals. She raised an eyebrow. Then what are you interested in? I thought about that question for a long moment, considering everything that had led me to this point. The failed SEAL training. That hadn't really been my failure. The 3 years of protective duty that had prepared me for this moment. The shot that had saved Admiral Hayes and exposed the conspiracy. The beach assault that had tested every skill I'd ever learned. I want to finish what I started, I said finally. 3 years ago, I was supposed to become a SEAL. Vincent Kowalski made sure that didn't happen because he was afraid of what I might discover. I want to complete my training and earn my trident. Admiral Hayes smiled, the first time I'd seen her truly happy since the crisis began. Elena, what you accomplished today proves you've already earned it. But if you want to make it official, I think that can be arranged. And after that? After that, We have a lot of intelligence networks to rebuild and a lot of traitors to root out. It's going to require someone with your particular combination of skills, tactical expertise, investigative ability, and the kind of integrity that can't be compromised. She stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Naval Special Operations, Lieutenant Torres. Your real career starts now. As I shook her hand, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that night in the desert when everything went wrong. The absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes the path to becoming who you're meant to be leads through failure, doubt, and betrayal. Sometimes you have to prove yourself not to the people who believed in you, but to those who tried to destroy you. Sometimes the most important shot you'll ever take isn't the one that makes you famous. It's the one that saves lives when no one else is watching. 3 months later, I pinned on my SEAL trident in a small ceremony attended by my new teammates and the families of the people I'd helped save. Admiral Hayes presented the medal, and Admiral Burke's daughter, now Mrs. Jennifer Patterson, was there with her husband. Their honeymoon delayed, but their marriage stronger for having survived its chaotic beginning. As I stood at attention, while the citation was read, I thought about my father, who had always told me that success wasn't about never failing. It was about getting back up when failure tried to define you. I thought about Master Chief Kowalski, whose attempts to destroy my career had ultimately led me to discover my true calling, and I thought about the compass that had led me astray 3 years ago. Finally understanding that sometimes the most important navigation tool isn't the one that shows you where you are. It's the one that shows you who you can become. The woman who had failed SEAL training was gone forever. In her place stood Lieutenant Elena Torres, Naval Special Operations, with a mission that would take her places she'd never imagined and challenges she was finally ready to face. The shot that saved the Admiral had been just the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.